Hey guys, if there could be a worst part of TULIP, of Reformed theology acronym, or Calvinism, as a lot of people call it, that acronym TULIP, like the flower, TULIP, the worst part is the P, the very last letter, stands for perseverance of the saints. Basically means that once you're saved, you're always going to be saved. You're automatically going to make it to heaven once you've said the sinner's prayer or, invited Christ into your life, become a Christian. Um, that you will persevere. And if you don't make it to heaven after becoming a Christian, then they say you were never saved to begin with. That is not true. It's very unbiblical. The Bible actually teaches conditional salvation from Abraham. He had 4 conditions on him that God uh, told him about, all the way to the end of Revelation, till the last book of the Bible, where you have to endure to the end to be saved, Jesus said. There are all kinds of conditions attached to salvation. The biggest problem with Calvinism is it puts too much emphasis on God's part. Don't get me wrong, God works in us. If you really want to be a Christian, if you're really born again, His Spirit works in our hearts and His grace works effectively inside of us. So God always does His part, but Calvinism and Reformed theology always underestimates man's part of the covenant and overestimates what God does. They always want to talk about what God does. But what about what God requires of us? And since love is a choice, it is totally possible for a man to at any point decide to stop loving God and stop loving his neighbor. Um, it's called moral apostasy. Somebody can commit doctrinal apostasy, where, let's say, they stop believing in the resurrection of Christ. That would be a bad one, right? That would be doctrinal apostasy. And I'll talk more about apostasy in just a second, but people always want to say, well, nothing, but I've been taught nothing can separate me from the love of God. I've heard that from the Bible. I've heard a pastor talk about that. That's true. Nothing in all creation can separate you from God's love except for yourself. See, we're totally free creatures with our free will. We can take ourselves out of God's hand. We can separate ourselves from the love of God. How? With sin, worldliness, selfishness, idolatry, and unholy living. Make no mistake, it was the same in the Old Testament as it is in the New Testament. God will not stay where sin is consistently practiced. He can't. He's too holy for that. I mean, it even says in the book of Timothy, God says, if you forsake me, I will forsake you. It says that. You just don't hear it talked about much by teachers or preachers, and they should. Um, we need to obey the commands of Christ and perform our duty and cooperate with Him. It's like in a marriage, right? One person doesn't do all the work. It's a cooperation. It's a fellowship to stay married. We must walk in the light and endure to the end and overcome to be saved. There are conditions. We walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. So this, just to kind of try to finish up here, this idea in Reformed theology of an unchangeable purpose of election, where once God decides something, like you're elect and you're saved, or you're damned, you're going to hell, that it cannot be changed. Let us forever get rid of that, because it's just not biblical. Will God finish the good work that He began in you if you're a Christian? Yes, if there's the condition, right? If you cooperate with Him. If somebody backslides, does that throw shade on the power of God? No. No, because God, in His infinite power and infinite wisdom, has given us free choice, so we can do as we please. He wants real love from us, as I've said before in other videos. So ultimately, let me finish with this last point. The word apostasy, what does that mean? Have you heard that before? Apostasy actually appears 3 times in the New Testament, twice as a noun, once as a verb in Hebrews 3:12, where it says, "See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart in departing from the living God." So the writer of Hebrews, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is talking to Christians. He's not talking to non-Christians, talking to the church, and says, "See to it, brothers, that you don't backslide." Essentially, what does the Greek term mean? In Greek, apostasy is defined as falling away, defection, rebellion, abandonment, withdrawal, or turning away from what one was formerly turned to. So it's not this idea that you were never saved to begin with. It's this idea that you could have been legitimately born again, saved at one point, but now you've defected. You've abandoned Christ. You've gone back to the world and to your sinful ways again. So we just need to be really careful. The Bible warns us, God warns us, because it's a very real possibility, and He doesn't want that to happen to you or anybody else. But let us just forever get rid of this ungodly idea, an unbiblical idea of once saved, always saved. Once in the covenant, always in the covenant. It's just not true. It's just not true. So be careful and serve Jesus.